Welcome back to the recap. Today we dive into the masterpiece that is Hotline Miami 2 Wrong Number. Unlike the first game, in this one you take the roles of multiple characters through different timelines, so things can get a bit confusing along the way. For that very reason, we're going to go through the events of this game in chronological order and answer the questions left open by the first game. This way may not be so suspenseful, but will be easier to comprehend. Still, if you didn't play the game, you definitely should, and experience the story in order the game presents it. Let's get started. Hotline Miami 2 takes place before, during, and after the events of the first game. So let's start from the very beginning. We're taken to March 17, 1985 to Honolulu in Hawaii. We're introduced to a group of soldiers sitting at a bar drinking. They're called the Ghost Wolves, a tactical unit specially trained in guerrilla warfare. The reason they're stationed in Hawaii is because the Soviet Union invaded American islands in the Pacific, causing the US military to be sent in to force the Soviet units out of the territory. The invasion itself isn't explained, but it was a result of built-up tensions during the Cold War. The Ghost Wolves are Barnes, Daniels, Beard, and Jacket, also known as Richard, the main protagonist of the first game. Although not evident immediately through playing the game, this answers the question who Beard is and why he was in Jacket's visions in the first game. They're old war buddies, both members of the Ghost Wolves. As Barnes and Daniels are keen on drinking, Beard tells them not to forget they have a job later that evening and heads out with Jacket. As they leave the bar, a reporter named Evan stops them and politely asks for a picture of the two of them. He then hands them the Polaroid and wishes them luck. This is a direct answer to the question what was the picture Jacket threw from the balcony in the first game. It was him and Beard in the army. Later that evening, Jacket is smoking his millionth cigarette and Beard has a talk with the colonel, who sends him to clear out a nearby Soviet camp. The colonel says it's imperative for Beard to survive, so he doesn't have to drink a whole crate of bourbon alone. Anyway, after Beard clears the camp, he contacts Barnes and Daniels to rendezvous. They're careful and speak in code, calling themselves different names. In any case, Beard meets them at the location they were clearing up. Barnes is beating up a hostage while Daniels is going through some good intel he found. He was also debating whether to kill the Soviet captives, so it's easier to get back to camp. Moving on to October 25th, 1985, the Ghost Wolves squad are chilling on the beach, talking about what they are going to do after they return home. Barnes is thinking of opening a bar and gets teased by Daniels, who is actually a teacher and has a job waiting for him back home. Beard dreams of opening a convenience store where he can put a small TV next to the register and relax. He also mentions he's not trying to think about it too much because things seldom turn the way you expect. After the conversation, Beard checks on the colonel, who is taking his time unusually long. As Beard enters his shack, he sees the colonel dead drunk in the nick of dawn. His room looks a mess, which is atypical. The colonel says he's received news he might be promoted and is therefore celebrating, though he doesn't seem happy, rather depressed. He is also very pessimistic about the outcome of the war and informs Beard about his one final mission before they are allowed to return home. The Ghost Wolves have to take back an old abandoned resort where the Soviets made their base. The colonel also expresses his dissatisfaction that only the four of them have to do it, and cautions Beard to stay sharp. The Ghost Wolves miraculously clean the resort of Soviet soldiers and are met with the commander of D Company, who congratulates them and says that they've been trying to seize this resort for weeks with heavy casualties. Later on, the Ghost Wolves are debating whether they are really going home and feel like celebrating if so. In the end, they decide to get some sleep and get drunk when they return to camp. On October 30th, 1985, we see Ghost Wolves again debating whether they're really going home tomorrow, because another mission was dropped on them, to recapture a nuclear power plant. Barnes thinks it's a suicide task, a mission meant for a whole platoon, not only 4 people. Beard tries to defuse the tension by explaining how the place is likely booby-trapped and how they can't risk a whole platoon, and a small guerrilla unit is more expendable. In that moment, the colonel appears in front of them wearing a skinned panther face as his own, blood pouring down his hands and face. He starts spewing that this is his true nature and that they are all just animals. It's slaughter or be slaughtered. He says all this is just mindless obedience, but deep down they enjoy all the destruction and carnage because it's part of their nature. After Beard asks if he's okay, the panther face slides off and Colonel explains how maybe he's had too much to drink and is going to lie down. The ghost wolves wonder what the hell he was on. The next morning, the Colonel says that they're sending them home tomorrow, but probably in body bags. Nice pep talk, Colonel. He also says that no matter the outcome, he's proud of them and it was an honor commanding the Ghost Wolves. The power plant is swarming with enemies, but the Ghost Wolves' expertise pays off and they somehow manage to climb their way to the Soviet commander's office. As Barnes tries to pick the lock, the commander, refusing to be taken hostage, shoots himself in the head. As he does so, the power plant starts exploding. The Ghost Wolves hurry to the elevators, but the explosion from one disintegrates Barnes and injures Jacket. Beard quickly grabs Jacket and heads down with him. We are now introduced to this cool getaway part where Beard drags Jacket out through barely visible tunnels. As they make their escape, Beard radios for help. Jacket thanks him, to which Beard retorts, "No need, I'm sure you'd do the same for me." Beard then hands him the photo of two of them reporter Evan took and says it's something to remember him by. 6 months later, on April the 3rd, 1986, we see Beard sitting in his convenience store talking to Jacket over the phone. I guess he made that dream come true. Beard asks Jacket whether he had time to make a copy of the picture he gave him after the power plant mission, but Jacket hasn't come about it yet. Beard tells him not to worry and to do it whenever he finds time. There is some ruckus in front of Beard's store, so he ends the conversation to go check it out. As he comes out to see what's going on, a blinding flash covers the screen. The Soviets dropped a nuclear bomb on San Francisco, erasing it from the map. Sometime after this event, the Russo-American coalition is formed in order to prevent a full-scale nuclear war. Who exactly has the upper hand in this coalition is unclear, but many Americans view it as a political betrayal and are shown to hate the influx of Russians in America. Now before we continue, I'm just gonna go back to the panther face a bit. The symbol on the forehead is the 50 Blessings symbol. This is because the Colonel is the founder of 50 Blessings. Seemingly a sentimental and pessimistic man at heart, the war progressively took a toll on his mental state and after the coalition was formed, drove him to create the 50 Blessings organization. And that's the prequel, answering the questions who Beard really is, what was so important about San Francisco, and why the Russo-American coalition was founded. This sets the stage for the events of the first game. Now we're thrown to Miami, 1989. At this point, 50 Blessings organization is fully established and the voice message killings experiment has been engaged. We're introduced to an interesting individual by the name of Richter Berg, the man who is later tasked with killing Jacket. Richter is a simple, calm and selfless man. He is unemployed and spends most of his time taking care of his ill mother Rosa. At a certain point, Richter becomes a target of the 50 Blessings and through threats they start pressuring him into doing the killings. The tipping point happens on April the 2nd, a day before the events of the first game, when Richter is threatened with the safety of his mother and his car gets torched in front of his house. During the month, Richter is constantly lying to his mother that he is actively looking for a job while performing the killings for 50 Blessings. Judging by the military supplies in Richter's room, it's possible he was also in the army, making him an adequate target for 50 Blessings. The whole atmosphere around Rosa and Richter is very sad and melancholic. In one of their conversations, we also find out his father is apparently no longer present in their lives. What is apparent is that Richter is quite different from other characters in this game. He seems like a good man thrown in a horrible situation. Blasting to April 25th, we see a man shaving his head in front of a mirror. His name is Jake, and judging by the 50 Blessings pamphlets, he is a member. Jake is also receiving voice messages and doing their dirty work, but is a complete opposite personality from Richter. While Richter is calm and caring, Jake is aggressive, loud and self-centered. He is also absolutely enraged by the messages, but because the people on the other hand, quote-unquote, show him no respect, not because he is forced to kill people. He's okay with that part. Since Jake is a prototypical nationalist, some days later he goes to the 50 Blessings headquarters with the genius idea of the voice message murders. He identifies himself as a proud member, and as he starts to pitch the idea, the nervous reaction of one of the staff gives him the realization they actually are the one leaving the messages. Although the staff is playing dumb, Jake is very pleased and excited about it and promises to keep the secret safe with him. Jake then enthusiastically proceeds to rid some meth-cooking Russian mafia apartment building, but is met with an unfavorable situation. He gets shot in the gut and is taken to one of the higher-ups named Petrov. Petrov and the henchmen try to interrogate him with no luck. Jake is ready to die for his beliefs. As they offer him a chance for final words, Jake spits blood at them, so Petrov puts a bullet to his skull. Some days later, Jacket is tasked with clearing this place, hence the familiar scene from the first game where Jacket finds Jake's body and his Cobra mask. Since we'll move on to the sequel now, I'm just gonna recap quickly that in the following days of Jake's death, Richter was tasked with killing Jacket. Jacket ended in a coma, Richter was caught by the police. Jacket woke from coma, went to the police station to kill Richter, who survived, found the head of the Russian mafia and killed him, and then got caught by the police. The important thing is that there is also an answer here to one of the questions left open in the first game. Why was Jacket satisfied with eliminating the mafia boss when he clearly was not behind the death of his girlfriend? I believe the answer lies in his debt to Beard. Beard fought along with him in the war, and in the end saved his life. But as the Russians dropped a nuke on San Francisco that killed millions along with Beard, Jacket developed animosity towards them, especially the influx of mafia, so I guess he felt that in eliminating them he would be able to return at least a portion of favor to Beard and honor his memory. And that's the symbolism of him throwing a picture of himself and Beard from the balcony. It represents letting go of the debt, fulfilling the obligation he had to his friend and battle brother. I also think Jacket didn't care about anything much after that, so he let himself get caught. With this out of the way, we begin the sequel, specifically on July 21st, 1919, a year after the events of the first game. We see Richter in prison getting two visitors whom he doesn't recognize. The visitors say that they're tying up loose ends and that they don't expect Richter to understand, but that he did serve them well and now it's time to say goodbye. Although Richter is confused, it's obvious these guys are the janitors from the first game, acting as harbingers of death. They're killing off the remaining liabilities. What puzzles me, however, is, are these guys the same two janitors the biker encounters, or are these some other guys? Although the biker did kill them off in our playthrough of the first game, there is an option to just leave and spare them, so maybe Hotline Miami 2 plays off in that narrative. Anyway, after striking fear into Richter, they just leave. We see they've arranged for this block of American beef to kill Richter in the prison yard. He's even got 50 blessings tattoos on his face and neck. Luckily for Richter, someone throws a lead pipe into the court and Richter manages to fight off his attacker. As he returns inside, he's confronted with a full-scale riot. Inmates brutally murdering guards and vice versa. The prison halls are becoming splatterfest. Richter, however, seizes the opportunity and takes a guard uniform from the locker room. Amidst the chaos, the SWAT team is just focusing on getting people to safety, so Richter manages to walk out like the other guards. He is free. Skipping another year and moving on to October 25th, 1991, we are introduced to another character, a detective named Manuel Manny Pardo. He is coming to his senses in some random-ass diner when an article in the newspaper catches his eye. Protesters in front of the courthouse for the Jacket's trial. People view his actions of killing the mafia as heroic and patriotic. In Hotline Miami 2 chronology, this is how we are introduced to the fact the Jacket has been apprehended. Anyway, Detective Pardo is on his way to a crime scene when he comes across a clothing store robbery. This is where we are introduced to his true nature. He walks in without backup and straight up kills around 20 people in cold blood. In the meantime, the police arrive, to whom he just says that it's a bloodbath in there and that this town makes him sick. When Pardo arrives at the crime scene he was initially headed to, Forensic Sideburns here tells him that the killer is now officially serial because of the MO. A slit throat and a message in blood saying, "They made me do it." They call the killer the Miami Mutilator. 6 days later, on October 31st, we are introduced to a group of people called the Fans. The Fans are Mark, Corey, Tony, and a sister and a brother called Alex and Ash. Now, the Fans are called such because they're actual fans of the voice message killings and of Jacket himself. To make things even more interesting, the Fans are actually war veterans of the former D Company that fought in the same territories as the Ghost Wolves. We can even see them sitting in the same bar when we are first introduced to Ghost Wolves. Anyway, they are getting bored at some Halloween party and are keen on going on their first job. As they take their leave, we see they have stolen a phone home van and spray painted it with 50 blessing symbols. Since the Russian mafia is dissolved, the Fans improvise their targets, mostly doing favors for their friends with loose gang affiliations. For example, their first raid is a gang-owned black market electronics shop / hideout or whatever. Anyway, Corey kills everyone inside and then they go for some pizza. On November 5th, we see reporter Evan, the man who took the picture of Jacket and Beard in Hawaii in 1985, attending Jacket's trial and taking notes. Jacket's lawyer and the prosecutor are cross-examining the lead detective, and both of them are getting nowhere. The court gets adjourned for the day and Jacket remains in custody. The reporter Evan leaves the courtroom and calls Detective Manuel Pardo. Evan wants to pursue the voice message murder case and asks Pardo for a contact to the Russian mafia in hopes of getting their side of the story. Although reluctant, Pardo points Evan in the right direction because apparently he owes him a favor. As Evan leaves the building, we see protesters rooting for Jacket. Apparently the Fans are also there to give their support, and the person on the left appears to be the biker, meaning he has returned to Miami. Evan immediately goes to the Russian mafia bathhouse and tells the bouncer he needs to see Petrov and that Detective Pardo sent him. The bouncer won't hear it and tells him to leave. Evan's determination prevails and in a lack of better judgment he attacks the bodyguard, pummeling his face to death. After realizing what he's done, he tries to revive the bodyguard, but his efforts are futile. He's dead. Evan panics and runs inside pleading for someone to call an ambulance, but instead of help, he gets a melee confrontation with the whole bathhouse. After miraculously beating his way through, he reaches the sauna where Petrov is detoxifying himself. Now, if you remember, Petrov is the guy who killed Jake. Anyway, Evan says that Pardo sent him and explains how he's writing a book about Jacket and the masked killings. Petrov is impressed how Evan had the balls to risk his life just to come talk to him, so gives him a chance to ask 3 questions. The answers to these questions are something we as a player already know. The first being, what is the vigilante movement that destroyed the Russian mafia? The second, why was the mafia targeted specifically? And the third, what were they after? Petrov has no real answer because he doesn't know. All he knows is that the mafia was effectively destroyed, and of all the masked killers they caught, not a single one talked, even when being tortured. Without much of a new insight, Evan goes for a drink with Pardo. He's giving Pardo shit for putting him in a near-death experience with Petrov and claims he still owes him a favor. Pardo, on the other hand, is giving Evan shit about writing a book on the masked killers and urges him to rather write about his case, the Miami Mutilator, claiming it's much more sophisticated. 6 days later, reporter Evan decides to pay a visit to Richter's mother in hopes of getting a new perspective. On the subway ride, Evan is confronted by a vision of the rooster Richard, who reveals he is on a financial downfall while trying to become a writer, and his wife will take the kids and leave if he doesn't get his shit together. Evan pleads for a little more time and promises the book will pay off. The rooster warns him that the time is the only thing he doesn't have. As Evan arrives to Rose's house, she reveals to him how Richter never told her the true reasons for his incarceration in order to spare her feelings. She, however, has been in contact with him after the prison break, and Evan tries to persuade her to give him Richter's contact. Instead, she proposes to give her son Evan's contact, and then he can decide whether he wants to talk to Evan. Evan agrees and asks her if he can go through Richter's old stuff. In his room, Evan finds actual copies of the voice messages, which is huge. On November 18th, we're introduced to yet another character named simply The Son. He's actually the son of the Russian mob boss Jacket killed in the first game. Now I gotta hand it to this guy. He's doing a heavy bag workout in a suit and has a full-sized shark in his office. Anyway, after his father was killed, the Colombian mafia established their domination over Miami. But the son is full of vigor and youth and homicidal optimism, so decides to take back Miami from the Colombians. He explains to his henchmen how they will make a hit on a strip club to which opening party he was invited. The henchman is not sure whether that's such a good idea, but has no option but to comply. Later that evening, the son comes to the strip club with a freaking katana and starts slicing Colombians like they're rag dolls. He savagely butchers everyone in the club and just leaves like nothing happened. Back in his HQ, in the comfort of whores and cocaine, he insists it's time to celebrate their successful murderer's rampage. However, his henchman is a bit shaken up and just wishes to go home to his girlfriend. The son thinks it's all bullshit and that he's pussy-whipped. Nothing some cocaine and hookers can't mend. Nevertheless, he lets the henchman go, and even gives him some bonus money for a job well done. 3 days later, the henchman comes to the son with the request of getting out of it all. He feels as if he's too old and too soft to be carrying out son's orders. The son is tough, but actually fair. He tells the henchman that he is out of it if he wants, but that he has to do one final job for him before he can go. The son orders him to get down to a Colombian-owned chop shop and turn it into a morgue. The son also insists for him to take a sample of the new drug they developed for whatever reason. Anyway, the henchman goes to the chop shop and successfully murders everyone in it. He also finds a bag full of money prepared for the Russian mafia before the Colombians took over. As the henchman leaves, some kid that works at the chop shop appears, but the henchman spares his life, telling him that this bag of money just saved his life, insinuating he will steal it. That evening, the henchman returns home instead of visiting son. He explains to his girlfriend how he quit his job and says he has a surprise for her, but it'll have to wait till morning. Tired of life, he hides the money under the bed and goes to sleep. The henchman now has a dream in which he is driving away with the money. Everything feels right until the radio announces a storm and Richard appears in the back seat. Richard warns him that the road he's taking doesn't look promising and that in fact he's heading towards a dead end. The henchman tries to fight it, but it's no use because he is aware of the consequences. You have probably figured it out by now, but just like in the first game where Richard is the grounded and realistic part of Jacket's mind, in this game he also appears whenever the characters are in need of a reality check. The next morning, the henchman wakes up to find his girlfriend gone with the money. She just left him a note in which she explains how he would have done the same in her place. Later that day, we see the henchman getting himself destroyed in alcohol and smoke in a private room in some club. Desperate, he tries calling his girlfriend a million times, but to no avail. To make things even worse, the fans arrive at the club with the intent of turning it into a splatter house. The worker from the chop shop who the henchman left alive is a friend to the fans, and he called in a favor with them to track down and kill the henchman for destroying the chop shop and taking the money. The fans hack and shoot their way through the goons until they finally arrive at the private room the henchman is in. He is completely out of his mind on that new drug son gave him. He's tripping balls. The fans are a merciless bunch and they proceed to beat him to death. As they do so, he mumbles how he just wants to go home. He even asks them to call his girlfriend so she can take him home, but the fans just brutally finish him off. And that's basically the story of a henchman who wanted out. Moving into December, reporter Evan is getting a phone call. He picks up and to his infinite surprise, Richter is on the other line. Richter agrees to tell his side of the story for a plane ticket to Hawaii. The thing is, Richter already fled there after the prison break, but now he needs to move his mother to Hawaii as well so he can continue taking care of her. Evan agrees to get the money for the ticket although he's broke, and Richter tells him everything, from his recruitment, Jacket's assassination attempt, all the way to escaping the prison. After the conversation, Evan spots a note from his now estranged wife on the kitchen table. The letter says she still loves him and believes they can still make it work if he doesn't put his job in front of his family. The player is now left with the choice either to call her and reconcile or to sit at a typewriter, start on the book and lose his family. We went with writing the book and losing the families, since it's more in character and bleak. On December 2nd, the fans attack a small dope fiend gang as a favor to Ash's friend Jack, whose little sister has been hanging with these lowlifes. Their mission is to bring the sister home and teach the gang a lesson. The fans bicker among themselves because some of them don't want to be errand boys and want something larger out of it. Eventually they all agree to come, but the mission is a failure. When they find the sister, she's trembling in shock and horror from the insane amount of murder that just took place. Corey tries to persuade her to come along, but she is beside herself, pointing a gun at Corey, explaining how they just killed her friends. Corey doesn't feel like arguing, so the fans just leave. On their way back to the hideout, their van breaks down, and Ash tells Tony to run it by that chop shop Son's henchman was clearing, that someone there owes him a favor. That someone is Andy, that kid the henchman left alive when he was fleeing with money. The very same Andy that after that let the fans loose on the henchman. 5 days later, the Son is advancing his war on the Colombians. After the successful slaughter at the strip club, the Son decides it would be a good move to rob a bank that the Colombians use for money laundering. He raises a toast to the new rise of the Russian mafia, and he and his henchmen are on their way. As they arrive at the bank, they take out their weapons and just mercilessly start spraying every living thing in there. The Son makes it to the vault and sees his dead henchman killed in a crossfire. As he is about to collect the money and gold, he has a vision of his dead father. His father points out that the Son cannot make him proud, because he's not there, and if he pursues this behavior he will end up just like him. Suddenly Richard appears and confirms his father's words, assuring Son he will die no matter what he does. On December 9th, the fans are pleased they got media coverage from the failed rescue of Jack's sister. They debate on what to do next to gain even more fame, and then Alex gets the idea to go check some storage where she bought some weed. As they explore the sewers under the storage, turns out the place is a body disposal site. There are even bathtubs in which the bodies are decomposing in acid. They just slaughter everyone they find and leave. A day later, Detective Pardo comes knocking at Alex's and Ash's door. Alex quickly hides her swan mask and clothes only to find Pardo already inside the house. He asks for her brother Ash, to which she retorts he doesn't live here anymore, urging the detective to leave if that's all he wanted. Pardo throws a few compliments her way and leaves. Now, this could be a bit confusing while playing the game, so let me break it down. There is a person in Pardo's trunk, and that person is Jack, Ash's friend who asked the fans to bring back his sister. Pardo probably got the connection to Jack's sister, who witnessed the fans' brutality and got Ash's address through Jack. Anyway, his whole intention of coming to Ash's home is to plant Jack's wallet in their house. By now you realize there's something quite off with Detective Pardo, and soon you'll find out what. The very same day, Pardo drives to the docks to intercept a Colombian drug unload. He single-handedly murders everyone on the ship and returns to his car. The police have arrived and they reprimand him for his recklessness. Pardo gets cocky with them and just leaves. As he drives away, he gets a call about another Miami mutilator murder. He arrives at the crime scene to find Jack, who was in his trunk, disemboweled. There is also a message in blood, "Don't make me do it again." Forensic sideburns here says that there are cuff marks on the victim's hands and that he died by strangulation. The gutting was done post-mortem. He also mentions how there was no wallet on the victim or documents of any kind. Pardo congratulates him on the good work and heads back to the office. Also, this officer cannot take the intensity of the crime scene that is spilling liters of vomit out of his fucking body. On December 14th, Detective Pardo comes to Son's headquarters and demands an audience with him. It is unspecified why, but he is turned down by Son's henchmen due to Son not being present, which is a lie. Pardo leaves and we see Son preparing for the final hit on Colombians. The Son is using a stripped-down Colombian as a boxing bag while explaining to his henchmen how after this move they'll rule the city again. He drives down to the Colombian boss's mansion and starts a bullet spray fest painting the whole villa in blood, paving his way to the Colombian boss's office. Inside, he is met with a dozen guns pointed at his face and the boss himself, who tells the Son his journey ends here. Instead of being even remotely afraid, the Son just starts counting to 10, offering him to surrender. The Russian mafia starts flanking the office, and as the Son reaches 10, they bullet-storm the Colombian's boss and his henchmen. Blasting off to December 20th, in the fans' hideout, the cell phone Ash took from the Russian henchman they beat to death is ringing. Ash answers, and it's Son on the other line, unaware that his henchman is dead. The Son explains how they run the game now, and he offers the henchman a chance to come back if he changed his mind. Again, Not knowing Ash is on the phone, he discloses an address where he is at the moment and invites the henchman. Ash tells the fans he got them something interesting to do tonight and they're off to the given address. The fans arrive at the building and hack the electronic lock. As they enter, they spread out and start mercilessly killing Russian mobsters, finally living up to Jacket. While this is happening, the son is celebrating his victory over the Colombians and is eating the newly developed drug like a candy. Some henchman even tries to warn him to slow down, but he's having none of it. It's time to get shit-faced like hell, but all of a sudden the drugs kick in and Son starts suffering some heavy trippage. We're now introduced to an insane level in the game called the Apocalypse. The Son takes a shotgun and starts killing his own men all over the building. Everything is dreamlike and insane. He comes to a room where he sees a massive brown bear feeding on henchman corpses, so he bashes his brain out with a lead pipe. This was actually Mark meeting his end. Corey also falls victim to Son as he sees a giant zebra switching dimensions, so he shoots it. Tony, however, manages to escape. While all these shenanigans are happening, Alex and Ash actually make it to the roof as planned, but they can't get a hold of the other fans and debate whether they should go back for them. As they turn, Son exits after them and immediately shoots Ash in the head. Alex asks Son what he's waiting for, so he shoots her as well. Now this situation looks quite different from Son's point of view. In his trip, he sees a giant two-headed swan which he decapitates with an axe. As the swan explodes, the Son is presented with a heavenly gate. He passes through onto a rainbow bridge. I think we all know what that means. Moments later, the SWAT arrives along with Detective Pardo, who is not supposed to be there. He bullies his way into taking over and enters the room the SWAT is holding at gunpoint. Inside the room is Tony, who managed to escape Son's madness, standing above the bodies of Mark and Corey. Tony surrenders, telling Pardo to arrest him because he just wants all the fighting to be over with. Psycho Pardo starts babbling that he's not gonna give him his 15 minutes of fame and straight up shoots him in the head. As Pardo exits the room, he lies to SWAT he did it in self-defense and leaves. Upon exiting the building, we see Son's lifeless body in a pool of blood by the building. He walked off the ledge of the building, if that wasn't clear enough. Sometime after, Pardo is called to another crime scene involving the Miami mutilator. This time the victim was cut in pieces and placed in trash bags along with another message. But this time, the murderer left behind a shell casing and some prints. Pardo says he hopes this evidence will yield some results and goes home. That night, Pardo is having a nightmare. In a dream, he is desperately searching for something in his apartment, and when he can't seem to find it, he returns to the last mutilator crime scene. As he enters the kitchen, he sees a porcelain ventriloquist-like figure sitting at the table with Pardo's magnum in front of him. The figure explains how he is Pardo's creation, unveiling the fact that Pardo is actually the Miami mutilator who is fame-obsessed. That's why he was always making remarks about how the Miami mutilator story is more interesting than the masked killings. And that's why he killed Tony with a remark that he's not gonna get his 15 minutes of fame. Anyway, the figure jumps on Pardo and he pushes it on the floor, cracking its head. As this happens, Pardo is ported to a movie set in his precinct, where the chief gives him a chance to turn himself in. Pardo plays dumb and goes on to kill everyone in the station in order to escape. As he exits the building, he gets held at a gunpoint from 7 officers. He tries to weasel his way out of it, but they just turn him into a Swiss cheese. As he falls to the floor, he is woken up by a telephone call from the chief, who says they need him in the station ASAP. It's unclear whether the ballistic results came and they're on to him or they actually need him for something else, but Pardo is not risking it, so he lies he's sick and hangs up. He takes his magnum out and assumes a home front position. On October 28th, we see Richter watching the TV with his mother in Hawaii. This means reporter Evan came through with the promise and sent Richter's mother Rosa to Hawaii. Anyway, the interview gets interrupted by an emergency broadcast saying that both the US and the Russian presidents have just been assassinated at the Russo-American Coalition Summit by a US Army general, the very colonel who formed 50 Blessings. Richter turns off the TV and Richard appears in his mother's place to put things into perspective. Richter thinks the police are on his whereabouts, but Richard explains it's much worse than that and that soon everyone will die. Richter calmly accepts his fate, and Richard comforts him with the line that leaving this world is not as scary as it sounds. Moments later, a nuclear bomb is dropped, and we see Richter, Pardo, Evan, and Jacket disappearing to nuclear blast. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Hotline Miami 2 Wrong Number, one of the best games ever. If you enjoyed yourself, support us by liking the video and subscribing to our channel, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers!